Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. While vaccines are well underway in most of the country, the Matthias Cree Nation in Manitoba is dealing with a COVID-19 outbreak. The community has the help of numerous organizations, including the military, to help them through the crisis. Daryl Stranger has more.
Matthias Cree Nation, also known as Puckatawagan in northern Manitoba, has over 200 active cases of COVID-19 in their community, which only has about 3,000 people. Now, members are being vaccinated, but it simply is not enough to stop the spread of COVID-19, as Matthias is in a lockdown to prevent the spread. Now, a 41-person medical assistance team from the Canadian Armed Forces in the community is assisting in COVID-19 vaccinations, conducting wellness checks, and delivering food. Chief Lorna Biggity is currently in isolation, and Acting Chief Shirley Castell says the community is using color-coded signs to communicate while everybody is at home.
Green is, all is okay, and then there's those yellow and red signs. It states on your signs of what those colors are for. If you can put them on the window. Red is for urgent, so you put that on the window, and a monitor or it can be dispatched to the nursing station that you are in need of medical attention.
Now, members of the Red Cross, a team from the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs, and an Indigenous Services Canada representative are all in the community trying to help out whatever way necessary. 62 people are currently isolating outside of Matthias while 13 are isolating within the community as part of the alternative isolation accommodations. Now, Lloyd Daniels lives in Matthias and he says the outbreak and the lockdown have affected the community's spirits, but they will keep fighting.
And we just do the best we can to help one another in this community. But it is very emotional, and it does make you cry, and it makes you think. Your feelings and your thinking come into play, but it can be heavy at times. But we always, I'm very glad that we always pick up one another from there.
The current test positivity rate in Matthias is up over 45%, which does have Dr. Marcia Anderson concerned for the community.
I just really want to strongly encourage people, as your community leaders, public health team has been saying, to stay at home except for those essential service providers or to get essential services. Because when we stay home, that's how we lower the number of close contacts that we are exposed to that either might pass on the illness to us or that we might pass on the illness to.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said the Canadian Armed Forces personnel will help with COVID-19 vaccinations in up to 23 northern Manitoba First Nations. Daryl Stranger, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Further north, Nunavut's vaccination campaign against COVID-19 continues. But today, Nunavut's top doctor said there's still a big problem when it comes to vaccinating enough people to create herd immunity. So far, just over 11,000 Nunavut residents have received their first dose of the Moderna vaccine. Over 6,000 of those people have had both recommended doses. The big challenge for Nunavut, half the population is 18 or less, and there is no vaccine for kids yet. Nunavut's Chief Public Health Officer explains.
To the best of anyone's knowledge, it's not possible for Nunavut to get to herd immunity without vaccinating children, certainly not in most communities.
In other news, as Mi'kmaq communities prepare to launch their moderate livelihood fishery, talks with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans have failed. The Alberta First Nation has joined talks with Crown Indigenous Relations at the Recognition of Indigenous Rights and Self-Determination table. The Chief Mike Sack said DFO is not recognizing the Mi'kmaq treaty rights and hopes talks with Minister Carolyn Bennett will be more successful.
We're basing our treaty fishery off of existing treaties, not based off of a moderate livelihood. So we're not trying to fit into that box anymore that government and DFO is trying to push us into. It was a good play by them, but I guess we've seen through it, thankfully, and we're on to bigger, better things.
To the West Coast, and the Tahltan central government in northern BC say they want a gold and copper mining company out of their territory. In a written statement, they state Doubleview Gold Corporation's Hat Mine is in a culturally sensitive location, and the company is not operated by the framework that applies to mineral exploration companies in the territory. Doubleview could not be reached for a statement. According to Tahltan President Chad Day, they will take steps to close the mine, which has been in operation since 2015.
We've tried for years to work with them and to establish a respectful relationship, but they don't appear to be interested. They want to do things their way, but they're visitors in Tahltan territory. We believe that we assert that we have the jurisdiction to remove them.
There's been a major development for the St. Anne's residential school survivors. Details coming up after the break. Welcome back. Today, the Assembly of First Nations Quebec-Labrador came to the table with Quebec's Indigenous Affairs Minister, Ian Lafreniere. It's the first in a series of political meetings meant to bridge gaps in the nation-to-nation relationship, and with no shortage of issues to discuss. What came up first? Lindsay Richardson tells us.
When the political roundtable between the AFNQL and the Government of Quebec was announced in November 2020, it was touted as a first step to mending the nation-to-nation relationship. Now, 4 months later, another first step, actually holding the first meeting.
The order is tall, as it should be. Expectations are high, especially from First Nation.
On Friday, a collective of over 100 First Nations delegates joined AFNQL Regional Chief Ghislain Picard, Indigenous Affairs Minister Ian Lafreniere, and for the first time, Premier François Legault to take a candid look at current issues impacting First Nations and Inuit.
It was an open, frank meeting, and the chiefs and our Argent chiefs were very frank in their comments today, addressing issues that are sensitive, highly sensitive, where we find ourselves obviously in different camps. And of course, I'm referring to Quebec and First Nations.
Back in November, Picard listed 3 priority issues: child welfare, application of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and racism in healthcare. The latter issue made headlines again this week after 2 nurses were fired for allegedly ridiculing an Atikamekw woman who sought care at a public clinic in Joliette, not far from the hospital where Joyce Echaquan died last September. The National Assembly apologized to Jocelyn Ottawa this week, and Lafreniere maintains cultural sensitivity workshops are part of the solution, even after it was revealed the fired nurses had already taken them.
It's not a vaccine. It's not that you go through that training and you'll be good for 25, 30 years ago. So it's not one action that's going to solve that by mystery. It's many of them, and we're going to have to face reality. Even if we do prevention, there will be people that will need, corrective measures in different ways.
There's still holdout on Quebec's recognition of systemic racism and full application of Joyce's principle, but involved parties have agreed to meet on a weekly basis, and Lafreniere says a larger forum on economic issues is coming this fall. Lindsay Richardson, APTN National News, Montreal.
Today's press conference by Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller was supposed to be all about COVID. How his department is cautiously optimistic with tens of thousands of vaccines rolling into First Nations in the coming weeks. But during his talk, he was asked about the latest apparent act of racism to an Indigenous person by Quebec's healthcare system. In particular, how Jocelyn Ottawa felt mocked by nurses at the Joliette Hospital, who asked her to sing a song in Atikamekw. Miller was asked about the nurses' union, saying Ottawa wasn't being mocked, but it was an attempt to comfort her.
Maybe the sentiment behind it was there was some good faith, but come on, it doesn't make sense. And this is about getting first-class care to people who have been denied it. In a system that, in a country that prides itself on its healthcare system, it's equality and access for all.
NDP MP Charlie Angus is calling it a big win for survivors of the St. Anne's Residential School. After the feds threatened to destroy them all, the Crown Indigenous Relations Minister now wants a review of thousands of documents detailing sexual and physical abuse at St. Anne's. Charlie Angus joins us now. Charlie, thanks for being with us. On social media, you called this a win and a day to celebrate for St. Anne's survivors. Can you tell us a little bit about why?
We have been fighting at least 8 years against some of the most toxic legal tactics imaginable from the federal government, all over the decision that was made going back to 2012, 2013, where the government suppressed thousands of pages of police evidence of the horrific torture and crime of children at St. Anne's, and then went into the residential school hearings, lied about that evidence, and had cases thrown out. And the survivors have been waiting for justice ever since.
What is so important about these documents for survivors?
Well, the federal government had a legal obligation under the residential school settlement agreement that they created this process that was supposed to adjudicate and get compensation to residential school survivors. And part of that was they were supposed to provide the evidence to the hearings of what actually happened in the institutions. And they told the survivors, just come and tell your story. But that's not what happened. At St. Anne's in Fort Albany was a horrific institution. The OPP launched a massive investigation into the 1990s. They had thousands and thousands of pages of evidence documenting child rape, torture, abuse, even the electric chair that was used to torture children as young as 5. And when the survivors came into the hearings, the federal government said, no, there's no history at all of any abuse at St. Anne's. Mm-hmm. Lied in those hearings and had cases thrown out. So they re-traumatized the survivors by telling them that they didn't believe their stories because there was no proof when the government was sitting on all that police and court evidence. So this was a massive injustice. It shouldn't have taken this long. The survivors tried back in 2015 to put forward what the government has finally agreed to today. Let's just get an independent review of what happened and make sure that there's a solution that's offered. And so today the government's finally thrown in the towel.
Charlie, what do you expect to come out of this independent review of the documents?
The independent review will show that the legal rights of the St. Anne's survivors were terribly violated and deliberately violated. The suppression of evidence it should normally result in people being fired in the legal system. That never happened at St. Anne's. We know that the government spent over $3 million on lawyers to deny survivors their basic rights. I'm hoping that the government realizes that they couldn't bully or intimidate the survivors into silence. I'm hoping that this independent process will reveal people who should have been compensated fairly and were denied because of these actions by the Justice Department and their lawyers to suppress the evidence and undermine the hearings.
Charlie, we'll have to leave it there, but like you say, it is an important one here, and appreciate you spending some time with us to talk about it.
Well, it's such a huge day for the survivors. They never wavered, they never gave in to intimidation, and I think it's a story we should all be celebrating, their resilience.
Thanks, Charlie. To Alberta now, where the government says it wants to modernize the 30-year-old Métis Settlement Act. But the Métis Settlements General Council president says the United Conservative Party did not do enough consultation with Bill 57. APTN's Chris Stewart has more.
Alberta recently read Bill 57 in the legislature. The bill will give more authority to the 8 Métis settlements across the province, including being able to charge for services such as water, sewer, and roads. It will also reduce the size of the Métis Settlements General Council Executive from 4 down to 2. Métis Settlements General Council President Herb Blair says he wasn't properly consulted and is opposed to the bill. He also says he didn't see a copy of the bill until recently.
For the minister to tell us, or to tell all Albertans that he's done consultation, well, when we as elected leaders have not received a copy, when the opposition party didn't even receive a copy of what those changes were, how can you have done consultation?
Minister Wilson told APTN that he has met with the General Council and leaders from the 8 settlements many times to discuss the bill.
from what I've heard from the settlements, nobody really has a lot of problem with what's in the bill. Some of them feel that it's important and we should have actually gone farther. A lot of people I'm hearing say that we didn't have enough engagement with the communities. But like I said, we've done extensive engagement with the General Council and the other councils.
What this whole move is about is to destroy the central governance of the Métis settlements, to take their elected leadership from 4 down to 1 or 2, and to squash some of the General Council policies, which were done for collective interests, and enable it at the community level, making them very similar to municipalities. However, I don't see this minister telling, or the government of Alberta telling other municipalities how many people they can have elected and what their rate of pay is. And I suggest that there's some systemic racism going on.
Minister Wilson denies any accusation of racism.
By modernizing the act, that shows that we want to work with them and help them. This is all about enabling them and helping them be more accountable and sustainable, and that's what we're working for. There's nothing heavy-handed here at all. It's enabling legislation, giving them the options. It's options and flexibility to make their own decisions.
At an emergency meeting held on the 17th of March, 7 of 8 settlements voted to not support the bill, with 1 abstention. Minister Wilson says the bill will pass before the summer. Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
Time now for a quick break, and then the ribbon skirt that is making waves. Stick around. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. This was the scene during a sunrise along the bank of the Saskatchewan River in the heart of the Cumberland Delta. Sol Carrier tells us the location is known as Big Eddy. Like that name. Keep those pictures coming. You can send your photo to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be featured as our next photo of the day. Time now to take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the east coast, +5 and sunny in Halifax, -3 for St. John's, 11 below for Nain and Kuujjuaq. +8 and sunny in Montreal, snow and 7 in Chibougamau. 13 for Toronto under sunny skies, +7 in Sault Ste. Marie. 9 in Thunder Bay, showers and 8 for Sioux Lookout. +6 with showers for Churchill, 10 and rain in God's Lake. 14 and sunny for Winnipeg and Brandon, 12 with showers for Dauphin. 11 with rain for Regina, partly sunny, and 11 for Saskatoon. 8 in Meadow Lake, 0 for Uranium City. Over in northern Alberta, 0 with snow for Fort Chip, showers and +9 in Fort McMurray. 13 and sunny for Medicine Hat, showers and 10 in Edmonton. 10 with showers as well for Vancouver, 1 degree warmer and rain in Victoria. +3 for Prince George, +1 and snow in Smithers. -21 in Old Crow, 7 below and sunny for Whitehorse. -6 and snow for Trout Lake and Fort Liard, -11 in Yellowknife. 25 below in Sax Harbor, -21 for Colville Lake. -12 with snow in Chesterfield, 27 below in Cambridge Bay, -33 in Arctic Bay, 29 below for Igloo Lake. Well, as you know, New Mexico Representative Deb Haaland made history this week when she was sworn in as President Joe Biden's Secretary of the Interior, the first time an Indigenous person has led a cabinet agency. A designer from Canada made the ribbon skirt Haaland wore. Agnes Woodward of Kawakatoose First Nation near Regina says it's still sinking in that her skirt was part of that history-making moment. She got a mention in Vogue magazine for, quote, rocking a ribbon skirt in political space. Pretty awesome, and Agnes Woodward joins Melissa Ridgen on In Focus next week to talk about the skirt and what it means for a cabinet member to be sworn in wearing traditional apparel. That's next Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 Central, so tune in for that. A Cree Métis woman, originally from Saskatchewan, is also making a name for herself in the world of yoga. In fact, she's on the cover of the latest issue of a yoga magazine that is available worldwide. APTN's Priscilla Wolf has that story.
And breathe that in.
Well, I'm 27 years old. I'm Métis and Plains Cree from Musqueam First Nations, Treaty 4 territory.
Sheila Stonechild now lives and teaches yoga in Vancouver. She also started the matriarch movement, and she is on the cover for the March-April issue of Yoga Journal.
Yoga Journal have been following me on Instagram for a few months, I believe, and so they were getting kind of familiar with the work that I've been doing through my nonprofit organization, the Matriarch Movement, which focuses on amplifying Indigenous voices through meditation, movement, yoga, and medicine, coming back to an Indigenous worldview.
Stonechild says being on the cover is an opportunity to educate Americans and the world about Canadian Indigenous history.
This Yoga Journal magazine we shot in Denver of December, and the doors that it has opened for me now is it's given me a chance to have my voice and my story heard into communities that may have not heard about what's happened here in Canada, especially the United States. A lot of them don't know about the Indian Act, and a lot of them don't know about residential schools or what's happened here in Canada.
Yoga and teaching is an important part of Stonechild's life.
I took my first yoga teacher training when I was, I believe, 22. And then from that, I got a lot of scholarships through other trainings. So I have probably over 500 hours of yoga teacher training, trauma-informed training, kids yoga teacher training. But really my goal in that training was I want to be the first Indigenous person to be on the cover of Yoga Journal magazine, because I also saw a lack of Indigenous representation within the health and wellness industry.
She says incorporating her Cree culture into her yoga training and teaching has been very easy.
We also, as Indigenous people, have a lot of tools that are already given to us from the families we grew up in, from our ancestors. When you look at our ceremonies, we have a purification ceremony through the sweat. We have sun dance, and so these are all connecting you to something greater than just yourself.
Stonechild is also a host for the APTN show Red Earth Uncovered. Priscilla Wolf, APTN National News, Saskatoon.
Great way to end tonight. That is all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Friday. For news anytime, visit our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night.